My name is Madeline Hayes. I was 17 when my world cracked open in two places. First, when the boy I thought I loved walked away without looking back, and second, when my own parents told me to pack my bags and leave. No goodbyes, no second chances, just a door closing behind me in the middle of January. It started out like a lot of high school stories do. Jake was the golden boy varsity soccer captain, charming, easy smile, always had a plan. And me? I was quiet. A student who liked sketching in the margins of her notebooks and dreaming about a life that felt a little more alive than the one I had. With Jake, it felt like someone finally saw me. We used to talk about moving in together after graduation, some little apartment downtown with terrible plumbing and big windows. Maybe opening a small cafe where I'd design the menu and he'd charm the customers. We believed in each other's dreams like they were gospel. But that kind of belief doesn't always last. By the time summer blurred into fall, Jake had changed. His texts got shorter, the silences longer. He started talking about Stanford Law School, internships in New York. And then one afternoon in October, just as the leaves were starting to burn red and gold, he told me it was over. Just like that, no fight, no tears, just his hand shoved deep in his jacket and a voice that didn't shake when he said, This isn't working anymore." He walked away, and I let him. I stood there in the middle of the park path, frozen in place, my scarf twisting in the wind. I didn't chase him, I didn't cry, not yet. I didn't know then that heartbreak was only the first storm coming. Jake and I met in sophomore year. It wasn't fireworks at first, not really. He borrowed my pen in history class and forgot to give it back. That was the beginning. From there it became late night calls, long walks home, and dreams stitched together over milkshakes to Dominum Sanuards a time. We were young, but we talked like we had the whole world figured out. I still remember the way he'd lean across the diner table, eyes lit up, saying things like, "You and me, Maddie, we're gonna make it big, screw the rules," and I believed him. I used to write his name in the corners of my sketchbook, surrounded by doodles of coffee mugs, apartment windows, and all the little things we said we'd share. It was foolish maybe, but it felt real. After graduation, something shifted. He started pulling away, like a tide retreating from shore. Our calls dropped from hours to minutes. His attention wandered during our conversations, and every time I asked if something was wrong, he'd brush it off with a quick "I'm just busy." But busy started to look a lot like disappearing. One day, I waited for him outside the library where he used to meet me. 45 minutes passed. He didn't show, no text, no excuse. That's when I knew I wasn't in his future anymore. A week later, we met at the park. It was the place where we first kissed, back when things felt simple and certain. I thought maybe we could talk, maybe I could remind him of everything we'd built. Instead, he ended it. "I have to focus on school," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You deserve someone who's all in. And right now, that's not me." I don't remember what I said. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. I think my heart was too loud in my chest to hear my own voice. After he left, I sat on the cold bench for what felt like hours, watching the wind toss the leaves, listening to the sounds of a world that didn't stop just because mine had cracked. The loss of him was sharp, but it wasn't the worst part. That came later, when I realized I wasn't just heartbroken. I was pregnant. And Jake, he would never know, or care. The signs had been there, subtle at first. I was always tired, the smell of coffee made me nauseous, and my favorite jeans suddenly didn't zip up like they used to. Still, I told myself it was stress, maybe hormones, maybe anything but what I feared it might be. But fear has a way of sitting in your gut until it demands to be heard. One Friday after school, I stopped by the pharmacy 2 blocks from home. I remember how the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stood frozen in front of the aisle, staring at the pregnancy tests, like they might vanish if I blinked. I picked the cheapest one, stuffed it into my coat sleeve, and paid in cash. At home, I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom, the one with the chipped tile floor and the mirror that always fogged too quickly. I followed the instructions with trembling hands, heart thudding against my ribs. 2 pink lines. That's all it took to change everything. I sat on the edge of the tub for a long time, holding the test in my lap like it might explain what to do next. My thoughts raced. Would Jake come back if he knew? Could I hide it from my parents? Could I even do this? That night at dinner, the table was set like usual: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. My dad read the paper while my mom hummed to herself in the kitchen. Everything looked normal, but inside me, a storm was building. "I need to talk to you," I said, voice barely above a whisper. My father looked up, adjusted his glasses. My mom stopped mid-step, casserole dish in hand. I stood there, unable to sit, unable to breathe. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was total, the kind that makes your ears ring. Then came the shouting, the shaking chairs, the shock melting into fury. You've disgraced this family, my mother hissed. You're not raising a baby under my roof, my father said, voice like ice cracking under weight. Pack your things, you're out. I begged, I cried, but it didn't matter. By the time I closed the door to my room that night, I knew I had to leave. And I had nowhere to go. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands still shaking as I zipped up an old duffel bag I hadn't used since summer camp in 7th grade. Inside, I stuffed 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans, my toothbrush, and the only photo I had of me and Jake taken at the county fair when things still felt like forever. I hesitated before sliding it into the side pocket. Let it be a reminder, I thought, of what trust can cost. The house was quiet now. My mom was still downstairs, sitting at the table, her face in her hands. My dad had slammed the garage door shut. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't expect them to stop me. I just stood in the doorway and whispered, I'm leaving. My mom looked up, her eyes red and rimmed with guilt. Madeline, please, just think about this. I did, I said, tightening my grip on the bag. And you made it clear. I'm not welcome here. Outside, the January air bit at my skin. Snow crunched under my sneakers as I stood on the sidewalk, blinking back tears. I had no plan, no money, no Jake, and now no home. But there was one name echoing in the back of my mind. Grandma Louise? She lived in Maple Falls, a quiet little town 2 hours away. I hadn't seen her since Christmas, but she'd always told me, if you ever need me, honey, you call. I don't care what time it is. With numb fingers, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to her number. It rang once. Twice. Then her voice came through, warm and familiar. Hello? Grandma, I croaked. It's me. I need to come stay with you. Can I come now? There was a pause, the sound of her shifting in her chair. Of course you can, she said without hesitation. Get here safe. I'll put the kettle on. That's all it took. Not questions. Not judgment. Just love. I wiped my face, turned toward the bus stop at the end of the street, and started walking. I didn't know what waited for me in Maple Falls, but I knew who would be there. And right now that was enough. The Greyhound pulled into Maple Falls just after midnight. The station was quiet, lit by flickering street lamps and the glow of a vending machine humming near the wall. I stepped off the bus, duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, feet crunching over frost. My breath fogged in the cold air, and my heart beat loud in my ears. Grandma Louise's house was only 3 blocks away. I'd walked that path once before as a child, clutching her hand, swinging it like I didn't have a care in the world. Now I wrapped my arms around my stomach and moved through the darkness like someone chasing a memory. Her porch light was on. That old porch had sagged for as long as I could remember, but it was always swept clean. A row of little ceramic frogs still lined the steps, one missing an eye. Before I could knock, the front door swung open. There she was. Louise wore a faded robe with little blue flowers and thick wool socks that barely clung to her slippers. Her silver hair was piled into a messy bun, and her sharp gray eyes softened the moment they met mine. She didn't say a word at first, just opened her arms. I collapsed into them. The smell of cinnamon and old books wrapped around me as she held me tight. Her frame was smaller than I remembered, but her hug still felt like armor. Come inside, sweetheart, she murmured. Let's get you warm. The house hadn't changed. The same plaid couch sagged in the middle. The chipped teacup still lined the windowsill. A radio played soft jazz from the corner, the kind of music she always said made the house breathe. She handed me a mug of chamomile tea and a plate of leftover sandwiches, thick slices of bread, meatloaf, and just a smear of ketchup. I didn't even know I was hungry until I took the first bite. We sat in silence for a while. The warmth of the tea seeped into my fingers. The knot in my chest slowly began to loosen. Then I broke. I messed up, Grandma, I whispered. Mom and Dad said I've disgraced them, that I ruined everything. I looked up, my eyes full of fear. I'm pregnant, I'm scared, and I'm alone. Louise didn't flinch. She leaned back, took a slow sip of her tea, and set it down with quiet resolve. A child isn't a disgrace, she said firmly. It's a beginning. Sometimes a hard one, but still a beginning. And just like that, something in me shifted. Maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just starting over. The days that followed were quiet, wrapped in slow routines and the steady hum of healing. Grandma Louise didn't ask questions. She didn't push or pry. She just made space. Space for me to sleep, to eat, to cry when the weight of it all got too heavy to hold inside. Every morning we had tea. She liked her chamomile strong, with a splash of honey and exactly 2 crackers on the side. I liked mine a little lighter, but I never told her that. It felt like a tradition I didn't want to break. By mid-February, the garden out back, just a patch of frost-covered soil, started showing tiny signs of life. Louise said winter roses were stubborn things. They bloom when everything else gives up. She'd chuckle, kneeling down to check their progress. Remind you of anyone? Sometimes I helped her prune dead branches or dust off her collection of teacups. Other times I curled up on the sagging couch with a blanket pulled tight, and the radio whispering soft jazz in the background, sketching whatever came to mind. I started drawing again. Not because I wanted to make something perfect, but because it helped me breathe. At night, I wrote in a little notebook I found tucked in the back of a drawer. I didn't write about Jake or my parents. I wrote about fear, about small victories, about the baby inside me and what kind of life I wanted for us both. You don't have to be perfect, Louise would say when she saw me staring out the window too long. You just have to keep going. And I did. I got a part-time job at a local bakery downtown, just a few shifts a week. The owner, Mrs. Keller, was kind. She never asked about my belly or my past. She just taught me how to frost cupcakes and made sure I ate lunch. It wasn't easy. Some nights, I still cried myself to sleep. Some mornings, the fear came roaring back. But I was safe. I was growing. And for the first time in weeks, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could do this. The day it happened was heavy with heat. Mid-August in Maple Falls could press against your skin like a warm breath, and that Tuesday morning was no different. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a chipped plate, when a sharp pain sliced through my back and settled low in my belly. My hands froze in the water. A second later, I felt the unmistakable warmth of my water breaking. "Grandma," I called, voice tight with panic. Louise appeared within seconds, her robe tied loosely, car keys already in hand. "Let's go, sweetheart," she said, not even stopping to put on shoes. "We've got a little one waiting to meet us." The drive to Springfield Mercy Hospital was a blur of contractions and deep breaths. I clutched her hand the entire way, my forehead pressed against the cool glass of the window. She didn't say much, just whispered small comforts like prayers, like anchors. In the delivery room, time folded in on itself. The pain came in waves, each stronger than the last, and I screamed until my throat went raw. Nurses moved around us in quiet rhythm, but all I could focus on was Louise's hand on my shoulder and her voice in my ear. "You're doing fine, Maddie. Just breathe. You're almost there." And then he came. A tiny, squalling miracle covered in warmth and life and everything I didn't know I needed. He had a full head of dark hair, scrunched eyes, and fists that curled like he was ready to fight the world. They laid him on my chest, and everything stopped. I looked down at him and whispered, "Elijah." It was the name I'd written in my notebook, over and over. It meant the Lord is my strength, but to me it meant something else. It meant home. I looked over at Grandma, and for the first time in months, she was crying. Happy tears. And in that moment, in that hospital room with peeling paint and fluorescent lights, I knew I wasn't just a scared girl anymore. I was a mother. 2 decades passed like seasons do, quietly, steadily, and then all at once. Maple Falls became home in every sense of the word. I never left. I turned my part-time job at the bakery into a business of my own, Hayes Hearth, named for the warmth I wanted every customer to feel walking through the door. Elijah grew up with flour on his cheeks and cinnamon in his backpack. He got a scholarship to study architecture in the city. He still came home every Sunday for dinner. One rainy afternoon in October, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, I didn't expect to see my parents. They looked older, smaller somehow. My mother's hands trembled around a faded umbrella. My father's voice cracked when he asked, "Is this a bad time?" I stood there, Elijah beside me, tall and strong with his father's chin in my eyes. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. Instead, I turned to my son and said gently, "Elijah, these are your grandparents. They've come a long way. Maybe they have something to say." And for once, I let the silence do the speaking. Some wounds don't heal. But some hearts grow anyway. I didn't rebuild my life to prove anything to the people who left me behind. I rebuilt it so I could live. Fully, honestly, without shame. And when my parents sat at my table that evening sipping tea from chipped cups Grandma Louise once collected, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. Grandma Louise passed 5 years ago. She never met Elijah as a grown man, never saw the bakery expand, never got to sit on the porch swing we rebuilt in her honor. But she gave me something more lasting than advice or shelter. She gave me a foundation, a chance to grow roots in the very soil where I'd once felt discarded. And now, when women walk into my bakery with tired eyes or trembling hands, I smile the way she used to and say, "You're safe here." Because sometimes revenge isn't about fighting back. It's about rising gently, quietly, and showing the world you bloomed anyway. If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll share it, leave a comment, or simply remember your beginning might not be easy, but it's still yours. And that matters.